So thank you so much for connecting with Linda. And we're going to introduce Linda Brown, a wonderful filmmaker who wrote the movie You See Me. Hi, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. I'm so glad to be here
Oh,
with you.
thank you. We're honored to have you as a guest on our show for many reasons. In talking to you, and Judy had said the same thing, just the connection and the communication, and you really do put your heart out there when you created this movie. So you're in California right now, right? We're Skyping in?
I am.
So give us a little background about yourself, Linda, so the audience could kind of understand your background, your history.
Sure. I actually started my career in film at Temple University in Philadelphia. I got a master's degree there, Master of Fine Arts. And then I moved to Los Angeles in the mid-'80s to attend the American Film Institute, where I studied cinematography. And then I, for the next 20 to 30 years, worked in the business, or as they say, in the industry. And during that time, I was also teaching part-time because I also have a master's degree in education. And one of the schools I was teaching at was USC. And in 2003, they offered me a full-time tenured position, and I have been there in that position ever since. So it's wonderful because it gives me the opportunity to work on a film like this and have a full-time career teaching, and then we are expected to stay current in our field. And so working on this documentary just fit well with that teaching position.
Wow. So we know, tell us, I know when we saw that clip about your dad and how Nancy, your sister, I believe it was, called
Yes.
you and told you that your dad had she didn't know he had a stroke. She just said he wasn't feeling well. He was at the hospital. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And so what did you think then? Like, did he ever have any history of illnesses or anything in the past?
Yes, he had heart issues and actually even had a defibrillator, and so I kind of was suspicious of what it might be, but you're never prepared. Even though you say, okay, he's been ill, okay, he has heart issues, it's always a shock. It was a shock to me. And I think my biggest fear was because I am a cinematographer and my world is so much about visuals, I kept thinking on the flight from the West Coast to the East Coast, what is he going to look like? What am I going to encounter when I get there? Will he even remember who I am? You just don't know how bad it is because it's those first few hours after the stroke that people either make a lot of recovery or they kind of settle into a place where the recovery and the rehab is going to be long term. And so even though my sister was like kind of updating me on this is the assessment, it was that 5 or 6 hour flight back to the East Coast that was really worried during that time. Like like I said, what am I going to see?
Right. Now, so you were on the West Coast and he was on the East Coast. And when was it determined that he had a stroke? Was it immediate or was it?
Yeah, he was at a doctor's office for some other health-related issue, and in the waiting room, and they called his name, and he wasn't responding. And finally, a woman went up to the counter and said, I don't know if that's the gentleman that you're calling his name out, but he's been there with his head down for about the past 10 minutes.
Right.
And so they went over to him, and they immediately called the ambulance and got him to a hospital.
Wow. So you got into the airport. I can't imagine how long that travel was. It must have. How long did it take you, and how long did it feel?
I was able to get a flight within probably a day, but it just felt endless. I mean, it was as long as I could be on the telephone and communicating with my sister, I could get updates. But once you get on the flight, you can't communicate, and that's when you don't have anything to occupy your mind. And I just was on that plane thinking, I don't know what's going to happen. And then you tell yourself, oh, it's not going to be that bad. But he was pretty debilitated when I got there. He was in a wheelchair. His speech was very slurred, and his prognosis wasn't good.
Wow. How old was he?
What happened was, it was hard to tell how much cognitive damage there was, because when there's the speech impairment, you don't know, does he know what's going on, but he just can't communicate it because of his speech, or does he really know what's going on? So we'd have all these little ways of trying to test him, like, what flowers are these in your room? You know, because we were constantly trying to see how severely damaged his brain was.
Right, right. And as we spoke last night on the phone, you never know, you know, even with tests, you really don't know how the brain is affected when you suffer a stroke and have aphasia.
Linda, what type of stroke was it?
He had a stroke that was in the brain stem, but it's the one from when your artery is clogged. The ischemic?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what it was, because and it was related to his coronary problems, his cardiac problems.
I really want to get into the movie. First, why did you name it You See Me? What was the reason that came to you?
Well, it was while I was working on the film, I could not come up with the title, and I was struggling with what the title would be, and I was talking to a colleague, and they said, when you find the title, you'll know. It's
right.
One of these instant moments where you say, that's the right one. And I kept thinking, well, I hope it comes soon, because I was getting close to finishing the film and still didn't have a title. So I was working on editing the film one day, and I got to a certain scene in the movie where my dad, his big goal was he wanted to be able to walk. He was still not ambulatory, and that was his goal, to be able to walk even with an assisted walker, with the assistance of a walker. And I came in to the East Coast one spring to visit him, and he kept saying he wanted me to come to his physical therapy session. And I was like, okay, I'll get there. And I always brought my camera with me. And he said he had a surprise for me, and he was all excited because when I turned the camera on, he said, "You'll see me."
Wow.
And he was very slow in his speech, and then he's finished with walk. But I was so touched just by his heartfelt delivery of that line, and I just kept thinking about it. And I thought, it works on many levels. It could work on the very physical level that he meant it, but it could work on a more metaphoric level. And as the film started to take shape, I realized that that's really what was part of what was going on in the film, is that I was really seeing my parents differently, both my father and my mother.
Right.
And that the stroke was really the inciting incident for all this, really looking closely at them as the flawed people that they are, and that we all are.
Yes, yes.
And accepting them on those terms.
Yes. So
At one time, I jokingly called the film a baby boomer's coming of age story, because I kind of grew up in the film
Right.
and became an adult.
Right, right. So that's a good segue into why you decided to do the film. Like, we know how the title came about, but what incited you to do that film? Like, why did it? I know why, because I read your bio and stuff. But tell the audience why you came about doing the movie.
Well, I think that when I first got that phone call that we referred to earlier in the show from my sister Nancy, and I got to the East Coast, and I saw my father, and I didn't know what to do. I felt very helpless. I'm like my dad. We were doers. It's like, well, we can fix this. And when I saw the condition he was in, and just his age, and I knew his medical history, I think I just picked up a camera because I didn't know what else to do. And I felt, well, I will record his recovery. And I think that was the initial impetus behind recording what I thought was his rehabilitation, what could eventually be his rehabilitation. And then I didn't look at any of the footage He lived for 18 months after a stroke. He passed away in 2006. And then I noticed that the dynamics in my family started to change. Once someone leaves a family, the relationships don't stay static. They're kind of fluid. And I was spending a lot more time with my mother, and my role in the family as kind of taking care of things started to shift. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll just keep recording this. And then I was offered sabbatical at school. And I was saying, well, during sabbatical, I'm going to make this movie. But I had never looked at the footage, and that was 5 years since the time that I started to record.
Right, right.
And then I got nervous because I thought, what if I look at the footage and it's really not good and there's really not a film in it? And then I thought, well, what if I look at the footage and I start to grieve all over? Because I had been pretty well into my grieving process, and I thought, oh, God, maybe this footage is going to just be a setback. And then the third and the scariest option was, what if I look at it and I have to make a film? Because there's really important footage here, and that's pretty much what it turned out to be. So then I just dug in and I started to make the film. I started to cut different versions of it, and I got to the point where I shared it with some colleagues who I trusted, and they said, there are too many stories in here. You're too close to the footage. You need to bring on an editor who has a little bit more objectivity. And then that's what I did. And then we cut for 2 more years, and then the film was finished.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, as we were speaking last night, and we all agree, and anybody that sees this wonderful movie will agree that there are a lot of dynamics to it. One is, as we spoke before, about the stroke. Your father experienced a stroke, which is very devastating, as I know, because it leaves you with this fear in you, this unknowing. It really is it really is a scary place to be. And I fight to stay in the settled side rather than the fear side now. But it's always a struggle.
You do a good job of it.
Oh, thank you. But this type of work keeps me focused because it has a purpose for me. And then we have the side where you just spoke about where the family dynamics change a little bit. And then we have the side where, tell us a little bit about your father's history and about your father a little bit and about your mom a little bit.
Sure. Well, we had always
Linda, excuse me one second, which is a part of the reason that you made this movie, right? To understand your father's dynamics. Am I correct? Right. Okay.
You're absolutely correct. I had made a documentary. The very first documentary I made when I was at Temple University was about my relationship with my father, because we were close. We were the ones who spent the most time together. So that one was called Your Favorite. And I kept trying to get him to tell me that I was his favorite child. And he resisted it. But what I was really trying to get him to do was talk about his emotions and his history, his family, what the family he came from, and he would only tell so much. But so there were all these rumors around his past that went on that we talked about within the family. When I decided to make the film this time, I realized, listen, this may be your last opportunity. Now, I think I was also a much more mature filmmaker. I realized that there's a time frame here. If you don't ask the questions again and get answers this time, you may not have another opportunity.
Right.
So I started to ask about his past, because there were rumors about that he was adopted when he was 16. What he discovered was but he never knew his biological father. And when he was 16, he assumed that the father that he was living with was his biological father. And then when he went to get his birth certificate at 16, so he could get working papers and get a Social Security number, get working papers, it had his mother's maiden name on it. And he was like, well, this is a mistake. So he took it back to his parents, and he said, look, there's a mistake on my birth certificate. And they said, no, it's not. And that's the first time they told him that the man that was raising him was not his biological father.
Wow.
He desperately wanted to know who it was, and my grandmother would never tell him.
Oh.
So there was this yearning and this hole in him, this unfulfillment throughout his life, that I think what he did is he made it be that family was even more important than people normally would make family importance.
Right.
But he had a lot of issues, about the way he was raised and the coldness in his family and the trauma of the way his mother treated him, she treated him with distance and disdain. And that came into our family, this sense of keeping secrets and not really sharing things and not saying I love you. And I was yearning for us to be more physical and show our feelings.
Right.
And so that's a lot about what the film was about. And then I keep asking and asking and asking. And after, when I came back to make this film, You See Me, I thought, I'm going to interview my mother and I'm going to ask her the really hard questions. And she's probably going to say, let's not go there. And to my surprise, she was very willing to discuss very difficult and tough subjects about domestic violence within our family, my father's history, the way we kept secrets about these things. And I'm glad that I was able to handle it this time. I don't know if, as a younger filmmaker, any younger person, had I gotten those answers the first time around when I was asking the questions, I don't know if I could have handled it.
Wow. I remember in the short video, the press video that I saw, that you asked your sister, was it your sister, whether you think they would have been better marrying somebody else?
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty empowering, to think about the dynamics of them coming together and how their lives would have been different if they would have gone, because you were really worried about your mom your entire life.
We weren't that close, and then we became much closer when I was making the film.
Right.
And I made a conscious decision to change that relationship. It was when I was working with my editor, Nels Bangerter, and he had all this footage, and he knew my family quite intimately from having all this footage. And one day we were just talking about editing, and in his he's a wise guy, and he said to me, what's going on with your relationship with your mom? And I got very defensive, and I said, nothing, why? We're just not close. But it weighed on me for the next few nights and the next few weeks, and I kept thinking, what is going on in my relationship with mom? And because I think that after someone passes away, as I said before, that dynamic changes. And so my relationship with my mother was kind of like, well, I'm dad's favorite. We do things together, and mom's there on the side.
Right.
But when he passed away, I had the choice to say, I can change this relationship. I can make it be more dynamic. It has the opportunity to grow.
Right.
And so I made a conscious decision at that point that when I would fly back east to visit my family, I would spend time alone with my mother for 2 or 3 nights, and it would just be us. Now, it was awkward at first because, like I said, my dad and I were the doers, so we would bond by doing things, and my mother's not. She can sit in the house and read a book and watch a show on television and just be very content. And so we had to learn how to be with each other.
Wow.
After all these years, and we have a relationship that that's very precious to me, that I never expected to have, because for all these years we just didn't relate to each other that way. Because it's not like the one I had with my father. It's very different, but I value it.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Because you were focused so much on your father that you didn't see your mother, and it really is a gift, and a gift that he passed. You have to look at things in the positive way. He lived a life, and it wasn't our choice to make him pass, but he passed. And that gave you the opportunity and opened the door to have a relationship with your mother. And it really is a gift that I'm sure you're treasuring right now. I'm sure you're treasuring.
And also it is the gift that I found that tape that my father made. I don't want to give too much away in the film, but my father's death was pretty traumatic because he started to suffer from vascular dementia. And so there were, in addition to all his physical problems and cognitive problems, then he started to have psychological problems, and he became quite violent and nasty.
Wow.
And so, his death was in this. We were in this very unsettled area, and the way we felt about it, and that just bothered me. And I kept asking more questions and exploring, and asking my siblings for any videotapes, and then we found a videotape that my father made while he was alive, and said right in the tape, if you find this after I pass away, this is what I want to say. And so then he makes this kind of testimonial or confession, or just really speaks from the heart what he wanted to say, but he was incapable of saying when he was alive.
Wow, Linda, we'd love to continue to talk to you, but we're out of time. But I want to give you the opportunity, because I always make sure that people can say their platform, because we're going to touch the world. So please take this opportunity to share with us, your purpose behind the movie and what you want to say to the world.
I want to say what I think is, what I learned from this experience is, when I became involved in the caregiving of my father after the stroke, my first impression was that this was going to be not a good experience. But I actually turned it around, and it became a very healing experience. And I think that to be caregivers for people we love, if we see it with an open, if we embrace it with an open heart and see it with an open mind, that we can actually see it as another phase of our lives where we can learn and we can heal. And so I loved the title that the Stroke Connection magazine gave to the article they wrote about it, which was Rehabilitating My Father's Spirit, because I really do think that that's what this film gave me the opportunity to do.
Wow. Well, Linda, it really was an honor on our side, and I really did learn a lot. And I know that this movie needs to be seen by everyone. We're going to post on the website how to get the movie so that everybody has the opportunity. And really think you need to see it. You need to go in with open arms and open eyes on the movie. You really can't go in with a closed mind, because there's so many different dynamics, and I know that different people are going to get out of it what they need to get out of it. There's so many different dynamics on it. I hope to see you in July, personally.
July 9th.
And we'll finish this conversation, and we'll spend the whole show with specifically on this topic, because it really is important, and it just is. So thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you later.
Have a great day.
Have a nice day. Bye. Bye, doggy. She's a beautiful dog.
Thank you for letting me bring Lena on.
Bye, Lena.
See you later.